Well-Being: A Life's Journey by Justin Smallwood. For my presentation, I chose to do an extension of assignment number 1. In that assignment, we picked someone that we knew to test their level of well-being. For the assignment, I had chose my mother, and the results showed her well-being was well below average. I was a little surprised by the results, so I decided to take a closer look at her life experiences, with her permission, of course, just to find out how those experiences affected and shaped her current state of well being. I'll touch base on subjects from her childhood all the way through present time that has had an impact in her life and how it relates to well being. Some information on my mother, just for context. She is 45 years old, married, white, and is middle class. Her childhood. She was raised in a small, impoverished Appalachian town in eastern Kentucky. She was the second youngest of 7 kids. She had to drop out of school to help support her family when she was just 14 years old. From an early age, my mother dealt with traumatic experiences. Her father was an abusive alcoholic who routinely beat her mother. Her mother, while trying her best raising 7 kids, never got out of the relationship, and it continued till my mother left at the age of 17 when she married my father. She never formed any kind of attachment to her parents as a kid. She was practically raised by her older siblings, as her father would stay gone weeks at a time, and her mother worked 2 jobs to support the family. They would grow what they ate, and if the crops were bad, they didn't eat. There were numerous medical problems as well, from illnesses to broken bones, etc., that went untreated as she was a teenager before ever seeing a doctor for anything other than required vaccines. So, how does her childhood relate to her current well being? Well, growing up, people would make fun of her because of her clothes, where she lived, etc., without knowing the extent of what she was living with at home. Fundamental attribution error was in play as people only saw what they wanted on the outside without knowing what was attributing to her emotions and behaviors, as she would be sad at school and lash out at people for making fun of her. Being around her abusive father had an impact that has affected her to present time. She never formed any kind of attachment to either parent, as her mother was always working, and it has affected her relationships as an adult. Growing up seeing violence and abuse created issues with men. She living in poverty and having been bullied because of it created self-esteem and body issues that started her lower level of well-being at an early age. The fact that her relationship with her parents was non-existent has had an effect later on, which we will talk about in further slides, but the violence and the body issues and her lack of trust with men all stemmed from her childhood, and they're all still affecting her to this day. Her married life. While my parents were still together after almost 30 years, there have been plenty of bumps in the road. When they first got married, they struggled to support themselves. They lived with my father's parents for a while till they got on their feet, but the lack of income and stableness almost ended things during the first few years. My mother continued to struggle with her body image after she had me at the age of 18, which ultimately led to depression. So how did her married life ended up affecting her well-being? With her suffering from body images, her self-esteem was down the drain. People with lower levels of self-esteem aren't as suited to deal with stressful situations. Dealing with the issues in her marriage and the constant battle with her body image and self esteem, her well being was already low. The fact that both my parents had to drop out of school limited their chances at getting jobs once they moved on their own, which in turn caused issues the first few years of their marriage as they struggled to support themselves. It was a few years before my dad landed his job that he has now. He's been there for almost 30 years. Issues, depression, and trust issues that started in childhood kept evolving once my mother was married, keeping her level of well being well below average. Present time. In December of 2016, she was diagnosed with a brain tumor. It was found after the optometrist noticed something during her routine eye exam. She had brain surgery 2 weeks later, but it wasn't the best news. The tumor was wrapped around her optic nerve, making it almost impossible to remove. She's been through numerous treatments since then. Luckily, it doesn't appear to be cancerous, but it has made her lose vision almost completely in her left eye. The pressure and fluid buildup is almost unbearable, and she's at too high of a risk for them to try anything else at this time. She basically lives in pain 24/7 with only short periods of relief in between. This condition has increased her already depressed state. There have been stretches where she doesn't get out of bed or doesn't want to eat. If depression wasn't already an issue, having a condition like hers only increases depression. Mood concurrent memory is also something that plagues her with this current condition. Because she is in pain most of the time, the memories that she recalls are those of similar emotions, mostly from her childhood. Dealing with her condition on a daily basis is a struggle that only intensifies her low state of well being. Depression, body issues, pain, and not wanting to get out of bed most days does nothing to help change her current state. In conclusion, going into this conversation with my mother, I knew she had a rough childhood, but I didn't know specifics. I had no idea the struggles and issues she had in her marriage to my father. Some of the details I decided to leave out. All I ever noticed was my mother, who's always there for my siblings and myself, someone who's always putting a smile on their face, even though they're in constant pain. From a stranger's perspective, you'd think by meeting her that she's living a pretty good life, but it's the things you don't see that tells the truth. I acknowledge that I was surprised to see the results about her well being from assignment 1, but after finding out more information about what life has been like, it doesn't surprise me anymore. People focus on what they can see externally, what people want you to see, but people like my mother that have gone through situations and been in environments that have had an impact on their well being have more to their stories. At the end of our conversation, she mentioned that while these situations have been hard to overcome, she's blessed with a lot of positives in life as well. She mentioned her family, friends, and the fact that she's made it through a lot. While her well being is lower than most people's, her attitude is well above average. One thing that she has started to do lately to relieve stress is just walking at the park. Exercise has been shown to increase a person's well being. She mentioned that by just taking an evening walk, she's able to clear her mind and relax a little bit. Another thing that she has tried to do is laugh. She mentioned how much she enjoys talking to her sisters and just having a good laugh. No matter how bad her day is, being able to laugh seems to be the best medicine. Her support system has been a huge positive as well. Having social support is all about perception, and she believes her sisters and kids have been the best support system anyone could ask for. Even with all the circumstances leading to her current level of well being, she's finding ways to make things as positive as possible. Even though genetically given her parents, I believe she has a genetic set point for happiness that may never change, regardless of the changes she's trying to make. Looking back on this presentation, the main thing that I wanted to take away from it was just to get an idea of what has shaped her into the state of well being that she is currently in today. I knew about a lot of the issues, but learning more was kind of an eye opener. She always puts on a brave face every day, so it's hard to tell that when she's struggling. But just knowing her backstory even more and the challenges that she's faced, it's no surprise that her well being would be lower than most people's. Things from her childhood, her marriage, and given her medical condition all affect her and her well being.